You probably know someone who skips the party, turns down the group hangout, would rather stay home than make small talk at an event they're technically invited to. The label that gets attached fast is antisocial, like something's missing, like they don't like people. The research says something much more specific is going on. Not fear, not dislike. A different set of wiring around stimulation, solitude, and connection. 5 patterns, each independently studied. Let's break it down.
They have a different baseline for stimulation. Psychologist Hans Eysenck's research in the 1960s proposed a biological theory of introversion and extroversion, centered on cortical arousal, the baseline level of stimulation the brain is already operating at. His theory, since supported by further research, suggested introverts tend to run at a higher baseline arousal than extroverts. Practically, that means less external stimulation is needed before it starts to feel like too much. A loud party that energizes one person can genuinely overload another, not because of preference alone, but because of where their nervous system was already sitting. Skipping the party isn't necessarily disliking people. By Eysenck's model, it can just as easily mean already being stimulated enough without it.
2. Their withdrawal is preference, not fear. Psychologists Jonathan Cheek and Arnold Buss ran research in 1981 that drew a sharp, important line between 2 things that get lumped together constantly: shyness and introversion. Their findings were clear. Shyness is driven by fear of negative judgment, while introversion is simply a preference for less social stimulation, with no fear component at all. Someone can be highly introverted and completely comfortable in a room full of people. They just don't need or want to be there as often. Calling someone antisocial usually assumes the shy explanation. Cheek and Buss's research suggests the far more common one is the second. Not afraid of people, just not drawn to constant contact with them.
Solitude is doing something for them. Researchers Christopher Long and James Averill studied solitude directly in 2003 and found it wasn't simply the absence of social contact. It was linked to specific, measurable benefits: increased creativity, deeper self-reflection, and a stronger sense of autonomy. Their work pushed back on the assumption that time alone is a deficit to be explained. For a lot of people, it's closer to maintenance, mental space that has to be protected in order to function well in every other part of life, social included. People who protect large amounts of alone time usually aren't avoiding something. Long and Averill's research suggests they're getting something out of the solitude that socializing doesn't provide.
4. They prioritize a small circle over a wide one. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar's research on human social networks found that relationships aren't evenly weighted. They're layered. His data identified an innermost support clique of around 5 people that most human relational energy actually concentrates around, nested inside much larger, looser circles of acquaintances. Someone who declines a wide social calendar isn't necessarily short on connection. Often, per Dunbar's model, they've just concentrated their limited social bandwidth into that innermost layer instead of spreading it thin across the outer ones. Fewer people, more depth per person. That's a redistribution of social energy, not an absence of it.
5. They're being misread through a predictable bias. Psychologist Lee Ross named a bias in 1977 that shows up constantly in situations exactly like this one: the fundamental attribution error,
The tendency to explain someone else's behavior through their personality, while underweighting the actual situational or dispositional reasons behind it. Applied here, quiet or reserved behavior at a gathering gets read as cold or doesn't like people, a personality verdict, when the real explanation is usually something more mundane: high stimulation, low personal energy, or simply preferring smaller settings. Ross's research suggests the antisocial label often says less about the person being labeled and more about how quickly observers reach for a personality explanation instead of a situational one.
Being labeled antisocial rarely means someone dislikes people. Across 5 different bodies of research, the more accurate picture involves a higher baseline of stimulation, a preference, not a fear, for less social contact, real psychological benefits gained from solitude, a small circle deliberately prioritized over a wide one, and an observer bias that reaches for cold before it considers anything else. None of that adds up to disconnection. It adds up to a different relationship with connection, more selective, more depleting to maintain in large doses, and easy to misread from the outside. Preferring the quiet room over the crowded one was never really about the people in either room. If you're into the psychology behind introversion, solitude, and how people get misread, subscribe. Because here, we don't just describe behavior, we trace it back to the research.